can holler out. Okay, good. Can somebody just let me know if you can see that okay? Everything okay on the screen? Just give me a thumbs up or something.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, good. Right. Okay, so obviously, you know, the museum. This is, you know, this was my childhood playground, if you like. I came here as a child with my parents all the time because I absolutely loved the place. We're now at the point where about 5.25 million visitors every year come to the museum. But that doesn't mean that everybody who could possibly come to the museum comes to the museum. And a lot of what we do when we do outreach involves a huge amount of effort on our part. So we bring things up into the museum galleries on a regular basis. There's a whole series of events called Lates. And as much as we love talking to members of the public, at best you'll talk to somebody for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. So that's 10 or 15 minutes of what we would call high quality engagement, where we're discussing our science with somebody and they are getting a flavour of the types of research that the museum carries out and looking at the sorts of things that are possible with the enormous resources that the museum has. But if we want to go beyond that, you know, and we might do this out as far afield as somewhere like Lyme Regis, for example, again, there's a huge amount of effort there, moving a whole bunch of kit and people to another location. Logistically, it's very difficult. We might only be there for 2 or 3 days. We might talk to thousands of people while we're there, and a lot of those people will be school children, for example. But we know that these are sort of fleeting glimpses. And for those people, we might make an impact. We might perhaps change somebody's career trajectory, but realistically, it's probably not very likely. And likewise, we might also work with groups of people who have very specialist needs. So these are a group of children that I work with. They're visually impaired. So this is them exploring one of our dinosaur skulls, for example. This is a 3D printed replica. And likewise, this is them looking at 3D printed replicas and actual specimens. So butterflies on the left, a shark's head on the right. And then the picture in the middle is a coin reproduced at 10 times magnification, just to explain the concept of why microscopes are so important for research. So again, we're not expecting to change anyone's life massively, but we realize that the more outreach we do, the more we can learn from people's response to what we're actually doing. But that doesn't really touch in very great depth what the museum does at the heart of things. So our laboratories are very, very well equipped. This is just our scanning electron microscopes. We're currently running 5 electron microscopes. They're all state of the art. They have amazing capabilities for looking at a huge range of different specimens. We can do so much with them. But you can imagine that bringing a group of people behind the scenes is quite disruptive. We can't do much in the way of research while we have members of the public wandering around. And we have about 300,000 school children visit the museum every year. So it would be absolutely impossible to give them a proper feel for the laboratory experience in the museum. And our research is really wide-ranging and it's quite complex and very interesting. So we've done all sorts of amazing things over the years. What I'm trying to get over here is research based around what you can do with an SEM can be so varied. And what I want to really try and do is get that into the public sphere. And how do we do that? So when I think about the national curricula and what science topics that are in the national curriculum, you know, there's so much about it. We can look at plants, we can look at animals, and that includes humans. We can look at everyday materials. So that could be anything from rocks and minerals to sponges, batteries, whatever. We can look at seasonal changes. So we can look at, you know, the emergence dates of different insects and animals. We can look, you know, as I said, rocks, light, forces, magnets, the list is pretty long. But when you look down that list, you can imagine that the Natural History Museum can engage with lots and lots of different things with that. And electron microscopes could be used to investigate an awful lot of this group of subjects, if you like. So this is my son at a very early age exploring stuff with a hand lens, just proving to you that, you know, kids are fascinated with the idea of exploring their environment. So obviously I'm a microscopist. I'm an imaging specialist by trade, if you like. I would love to be able to show people what microscopes are capable of. And there are some really good online resources that allow you to learn about electron microscopes, what they can do for you. You can interactively explore a virtual electron microscope, change different parameters, and see what happens when you do that. And that's a great training resource. But again, it locks you out of this direct experience. And we can make models. You know, Lego is a great way of kind of demonstrating stuff. So we can make models out of Lego, and we can encourage people to make their own Lego kits and things like that. And we can show you incredible photographs that we've taken with electron microscopes. And again, it opens up all of the discussion, but it's not the same as sitting down at a microscope. So if I was thinking about it, I would love to take an S.E.M and use it with school groups all the time. So what would that be? What would an ideal scanning electron microscope that was designed really for outreach look like? Well, the first thing I'd want it to be portable. I'd want to be able to take it wherever my audience is. I want it to be easy to use. I want these two. These are my kids, that's why I can use them in all these. And I want kids these age to be able to explore stuff, and that needs to be robust. It needs to survive this kind of mishandling, but it needs to give good results. So it needs to be high performance, and it needs to be able to look at a lot of different things. So it needs that versatility. So there's a fairly short list of things, but a very complicated list of things when you think about what an electron microscope in a laboratory is really all about. And these things actually exist. This is me in Lyme Regis using a portable scanning electron microscope, and it ticks all the boxes. It's obviously clearly portable because it's here in Lyme Regis. It was set up in a marquee and left overnight with no problem. We left it there for a week. We did lots and lots of work. And I've been borrowing these microscopes from the company since about 2006, but currently the museum doesn't own one. So we can borrow one, but we don't actually own one. And that limits what we can do. So a colleague of mine, James Perkins, he and I have been discussing this for years. We've been trying to fundraise to try and buy a microscope, unsuccessfully so far, but you know, we never know. But the whole point is we had this idea of what would we do if we had one. So we looked at an activity that the Royal Microscopical Society has been doing for a number of years, and they have boxes of standard light microscopes that they send to schools, and you can apply to borrow the microscope kit for a term. It's full of activities. You can do lots of different things, and this is just a map of all the places in the UK, including Jersey and way up in the Orkneys, that have used these microscope activity kits. And over the time that this project's been running, well over 200,000 children have worked on these, have worked with these kits. So this has been, for a long time, this has been our ambition, our model, if you like. And then we found out about this program. So this is Hitachi. So this is the company that we've been borrowing microscopes from. What we were unaware of is that they actually have an outreach program called the STEM Education Outreach Program. And that has been running successfully in the US and in a few other places for a number of years. So James had a Churchill Fellowship and was able to go to America and investigate this program, visit some of the sites, talk to some of the key players. And in doing so, obviously, his enthusiasm rubbed off on them. And we got an email in May of 2020. So if you think about when this would take place, what they were basically doing was offering to lend us an SEM for at least a year to do an outreach program. But we had to do this at short notice, and we had to write a proposal within a matter of literally 2 weeks. We had 2 weeks to write a complete research proposal, or not a research proposal, but a proposal to match their needs. So because we've been talking for a long time about this, we scurried around and we got together all of our partners that we've been talking to, and we said, are you okay to do this? And everyone agreed. But this is the background. This is what was happening in the world when that email came out. We were full on lockdown. So this is London, Piccadilly Circus. And so the world was a very different place in May 2020 than it is now. And prior to that, it was a unique situation. So I'm going to start my talk really in the middle of that process. So, you know, we decided to launch a portable SEM loan scheme in the UK during a global pandemic. But when you, on the face of it, that's the most stupid decision you can make and the worst possible timing. But we thought, you know, the worst that could happen is that things could go horribly wrong and we'd have to send this back to America. But we were pretty confident that we'd give this a good go. So we had a whole bunch of partners lined up for this. So we had the Royal Microscopical Society, and they have that expertise in this instrument loan program through the microscope activity kits. We were working with Oxford Instruments, and they make analytical equipment that bolts onto the SEM and allows you to extend its versatility. Obviously, I work at the Natural History Museum, and our expertise is really in outreach and education. And we were partnered with the Institute for Research in Schools, and we see this as a really key partner in this whole project. So their expertise is in developing research programs for schools. So what they want is they want students to develop student-led projects where they will investigate something for an extended period of time, and they'll make mistakes, they'll go back, they'll redesign their experiments. And the aim is that they'll write this up, they'll submit it. It might be for a CREST award, it might be for an EPQ, and they have their own conference series. So they run 3 conferences across the country. In fact, the next one is next week. I'll be going over to the London one, but they have one in the Midlands and one in Scotland as well. So they offer a platform for these students to talk about their research. I think that's a really important factor in this whole project. So what were we aiming to do? Our aim was to spend as much of the teaching year as possible with the SEM in schools. The idea is not to park it in one location, but to put the microscope in the schools and let the children use it. And then at the end, during the summer holidays, it would be based somewhere. We decided probably the Natural History Museum, but we did some experiments where we sent it to other museums. So we can use it in the galleries to do outreach, or we could park it in the Angela Marmont Centre and allow amateur naturalists or amateur scientists to come and examine their own specimens using an SEM. So again, the aim was to do that balance between teaching and outreach. So this was our first experience of the SEM. It arrived in August. So May to August, we were frantically trying to plan things, get everything lined up. We set it up, learned how to use it. I mean, we already knew how to use it, but this time around we were doing something a bit more complicated. So we had to learn, how do we teach somebody to use this remotely? How do we teach somebody to unpack this from its shipping crate and put it together remotely? We're talking about teachers who've never seen an SEM in most cases, might be very nervous about this kind of work. And so we practiced this using a combination of Teams and TeamViewer. So this is me on a Teams call, doing some training, showing people how to use the microscope and practicing all of this. And then we wanted to demonstrate to the schools that this is truly a portable microscope. So we took some photographs. I arranged with the photographer at the museum. We put the S.E.M onto a bench, onto a trolley, took it into the museum, plugged it in, switched it on, and took some photographs. So these are real. This is active. The microscope's working. And you never see this normally. Even early in the morning, the museum is full of cleaners and people wandering around. So we were just taking advantage of the lockdown conditions of getting some of these extraordinary photographs. And again, this is up in the mineral gallery, different specimen, few minutes later, just plugged in with one cable and all running. So again, just giving people the confidence that this is truly a portable microscope. And then we had to go through and explain to people what are the controls, how difficult is this to use. So the controls on this microscope are very basic. We've got some controls to change the magnification, some controls for changing the brightness and contrast, a focus control, and then auto controls on these. So you can autofocus, you can adjust the brightness and contrast under auto. And then there's some very simple change the accelerating voltage, which basically changes the imaging conditions. Capture an image is very simple. It's just a single button. So the point was to explain to the teachers how easy it is to use, but also to develop a training guide that enabled the teachers to have the confidence to stand up in front of a classroom and say, okay, kids, today we're going to be using a scanning electron microscope and this is how you use it. So a very different experience for the teachers in many cases. So the next step is to pack up the microscope. It's fully packed up in its crate. It weighs about 80 kilograms, but 80 kilograms is not that heavy. 2 people can lift that into the back of a van or a car. What we tended to do was strap it to a pallet and just send it by lorry. And we found that was a very cost-efficient way of doing it. It costs about £80 to deliver it and £80 to collect it. I've done the maths. We've been running the program for 2.5 years now. We spent less than £2,500 on shipping costs. So very cost-effective way of doing this. And we sent a whole bunch of samples with the microscope so that the teachers have something to look at straight away. So we've got things like up here, we've got a battery cut through as a cross section. We've got some human hair. We've got some sand off the beach. We've got some bits of butterfly wing, things like that. So, and then in the box as well is a whole bunch of stuff to allow the students to prepare their own samples. So we really want to encourage the students to explore the world around them. So we were suggesting, start off with things that are familiar to you. Have a look at coins, for example. Have a look at just bits and pieces around the lab, around your home, and then think about some of the more exploratory things. So have a look at leaves, have a look at flowers, have a look at dead insects. And these microscopes are tremendously robust. You can go out and pick a flower and put it in the microscope, and the vacuum will slowly destroy the flower, but you'll have a good amount of time to examine it before it becomes completely desiccated. So again, just having a look at when did all this take place. If we look at the various lockdowns, this seems like a distant memory now, but these are the periods when the lockdown took place. So these dark purple bars, this is the time when the microscope arrived in August. So we had a very short window initially when we could work. So we sent this out pretty much straight away. And then by November, it had to be returned to the museum. It was then stuck in the museum for that lockdown period until the following February, really. And then we got it straight out into schools again. So as soon as we were able to ship it, we were shipping it. So what have we been doing with it? This is just a snapshot of a short period. So our first experience obviously was working with James in his school. So he only had it for 4 weeks before they were locked down. But in that period, they got 4 teachers trained, and those teachers were then using the microscope regularly. They had about 11 students who were trained to use it independently, and they would literally come out of a class, pick up their samples, go around the corner and switch on the microscope and use it. So unsupervised. And And then about 20 other students use the microscope to do research projects. So overall, about 60 students use the microscope because some of them were being used. Some of the time it was being used in lessons to demonstrate things. So physics, chemistry, biology, that sort of thing. And then we started to reach out to other schools. So we had about 5 or 6 other teachers were taught how to use the microscope remotely. Some of the students use the microscope remotely because you can connect to it using TeamViewer, which allows you to completely control the microscope from your own desk. And with that, we were able to work with about 100 to 150 students using it in lessons. So by the end of our first year, we'd had about 200 students use the microscope, 10 teachers. And sort of we felt we were onto a winner, you know, very, very difficult circumstances, but things were going well. And then we had a little bit of a review. So this was our first year, and we have a mixture of grammar schools, state schools, some private schools, academy schools. That's basically the state sector. So you can see the majority of our use is really state sector, and quite a lot of use in lessons, but also about 10% research projects and about 27%. So, you know, almost a third of the time being used by students independently, and over a third being used to just purely investigate what an SEM can do. So this was absolutely what James and I wanted to do. We wanted to give children the freedom to explore, to learn, and also to have that independence of spirit so they could learn from their own mistakes, go back, try different things. And again, we, right from the outset, we kept very good records. So what type of schools were hosting the microscope, what they were doing with it. So were they doing projects internally or were they working with outside schools? One of the interesting things was basically the state schools tended to have their students working independently in the school, and the private schools did loads and loads of outreach. So the more well-resourced the school, the more outreach they tended to do, which was kind of interesting from our point of view. And that extended into the following year. So by the following year, we were getting more and more data about this, and you can see immediately the academy schools. So these are the more well-resourced state schools, if you like, do quite a lot of outreach. Private schools do huge amounts of outreach. And when you add these numbers up, they're more or less equivalent. Not quite, but pretty close to being equivalent. So similar numbers of kids are experiencing this, but you can start to see that the numbers are climbing. We're up around nearly 4,000 students using it, close to I think 50 or 60 teachers by this point, and we're now up to, I think we've got about 10,000 students have used the microscopes. We've trained something like 180 teachers, and this is our map, if you like. So these red ones down here are all the schools that have borrowed the microscope, and the blue ones up here, Androssen is also should be a blue one. I just clicked on it by accident. These are some of the schools that have applied to use it in the coming year. So you can see that geographically our map is starting to spread, and we're starting to get that national engagement that we were really hoping for. We've also loaned the microscope to a museum in Leeds and another one in Staffordshire. So again, we're pushing the microscope around, trying to get that national engagement that we really want to see. If we look at just Scotland alone, these are our proposals for next year. What we can see is that some of these are grouping together, and what we're going to be doing is proposing to some of these Scottish schools that they try and group together. 1 or 2 of these schools should act as a host, and then we'll try and get the other schools to remote connect to the microscope or see whether they can travel. But where these places are quite geographically dispersed, part of me just wants to send them the microscope so that they actually have it there rather than have a remote access, but we'll see what happens. So what sort of things have we been doing? This is a group at Liverpool. This is Liverpool Life Sciences. These are one of our star schools, actually. Michaela here has been an incredible advocate for this project. And they've been using the microscope in lessons. So this is one of their teachers teaching the students how the microscope works, just going through the process. Again, using it in a lesson to discuss theory. And then this is the students using it independently, looking at their own project and investigating stuff. What's been really interesting with Liverpool Life Sciences, we were expecting this to be purely a science-led program, but they used it in creative writing, they used it in art, they used it in lots of different areas, and they've been very, very successful in pushing the boundaries of what you can do. This is a school. This is a junior school doing outreach remotely. So they're all looking at the SEM displayed on their smart screen in their classroom. This is them asking questions. So this is you can see how enthusiastic this girl's jumped up from her chair to ask questions. And I know that the microscope was actually being used by a student at another school. So this was a student teaching to a group of junior school children. So I thought that was a really fantastic thing. This is a school in China, remote connecting to another school in the UK. Just proving that you can do this at an international level. So this is Andy, who's based in West London, talking to a school in Fushan in China. And then this is a school in East London. This is from a school with some very difficult children. They're operating under very difficult circumstances a lot of the time. They saw a huge increase in interest in science in their school while they had the loan. They had a school science club that went from about 6 or 7 children to over 20. They had children turning up early before school, wanting to use the microscope, staying after school, wanting to use the microscope, skipping lunch because they wanted to use the microscope. So we really found that we had really deep engagement with some of these children. And that's what we really want. What we want is for those children to really change course and think about a career in science rather than footballer or pop star or Instagram influencer or something like that. So again, this is the microscope being used in outreach. This was at the World Museum in Liverpool. And again, these children are literally hands-on, investigating what the microscope can do, talking to the teacher here who's explaining what the microscope does. Again, I don't think anyone's in any, these kids aren't suddenly going to become scientists at this age, but the more exposure to this type of scientific equipment they have, I think the more they understand that there's more variety in science than sort of the David Attenboroughs and so on that you see on the TV. I like this one because I know that this was taken at the point when the screen switched on and she saw her specimen for the first time. And again, this is another group from one school coming into another school and looking at their specimens. So it's all about the discovery aspect of it and the engagement. More photographs from schools. This is children in an art class trying to make models of what they've seen in the microscope. These are children looking at preparing their specimens just ready to go into the microscope as well. While we were working at the museum, there was a program called Kickstart. Kickstart was an opportunity for young people who were struggling to get careers in science or get into the workplace. We took 31 Kickstart trainees at the Natural History Museum, and about 2/3 of them are now in full-time employment, which, considering these are individuals who were on long-term unemployed previously, I think it's a fantastic achievement. So these are the half dozen students that I was working with, and we had them working on the outreach program, helping me with the logistics of sorting out the SEMs, coming up with new ideas for projects. And then obviously in that whole process, all of them learned to use scanning electron microscopes. And I'm probably most proud of Rima here, who was really, really struggling to find a job. And she's now got a full-time job at King's College. So that's an amazing achievement. I feel so proud of her in particular. This is again, outreach. This is a friend of mine, Alex Hyde, up in where was this? Up in Staffordshire. And this is a group who are home educators. So just proving that you can go beyond the school as well. So we put the SEM was put into a community centre, and the home education group came in to look at the microscope for the day. Again, just some silly examples. This is a nice image of a tardigrade that Alex prepped, and just a nice image. We have a student, a junior teacher at a school in Tunbridge. She went from being a real kind of nervous, mousy kind of character, very timid, very fearful of how do I do this. Within the course of a year, this is her speaking to a local radio station about the project work that she's been doing with the students that she's been working with. So we're seeing real career progression within the teachers as well. So these are sort of markers that we're noting all the way through this project. Again, this is outreach in a school. This is one school visiting just to see. And possibly one of our biggest successes, this young lady here won the Young Scientist of the Year award for her project work using the SEM while her school had the microscope on loan. So this is her receiving her award. And then a few months later, the school sent a group of children up to the Natural History Museum to visit us in the labs. And we sat down with them, we showed them around the labs, talked about the research we did, and then we sat them down in front of our research microscopes. And of course, as far as they're concerned, it's just another SEM. So once they'd figured out where the controls were, they were able to operate these just as well as our PhD students, which I found absolutely brilliant. So much fun. We've had some laughs. I've been invited up to a community outreach project that we were supporting by sending the microscope into the school. So this is some drinks to celebrate the opening of a collaborative art project that the microscope supported. And then these are some of the feedback. So these are, little notes that were written by school children and written and sent to us. So, amazing, so cool, the best ever. Really fun. When I used the electron microscope, it made me feel really smart. I like using the SEM as I got to go deeper into my learning, and also just trying something new. And then the sort of more sort of impactful ones. As a young Black female, I rarely get opportunities like this. Using the electron microscope is an amazing experience. I learned so much in a short period, and we'll be ever so grateful if we can continue using it. So we made sure wherever possible that if schools were engaged in the program, we tried to get the microscope back out to them the following year as well. And again, another one, with all the tragedy going on in society, the Natural History Museum supporting our scientific education is really changing our lives. Everyone's being included, and it's helping us bring us together. So I thought that in itself is a great way to kind of summarize what we were trying to do with this project. So that's the end of what I was going to talk about today. So if you've got any questions for me, I'm absolutely delighted to answer any of those.